Imagine a moment when you first felt the warmth of love, a spark that promised everything you'd ever dreamed of. Now, picture that same flame flickering into something unrecognizable, a shadow that clings to you long after the light has faded. We enter relationships chasing a story we've been told since childhood, one where two souls fit together like puzzle pieces, destined to complete each other. But what happens when the edges don't align, when the picture starts to distort into something you never signed up for? It begins innocently enough, with a glance that lingers too long or a question that carries an edge you can't quite place. You tell yourself it's nothing. That love is supposed to feel this way, intense, consuming, a little uncertain. The small things pile up quietly, like dust settling on a shelf you forgot to clean. A comment about your choices, a sigh when you speak, a subtle shift that makes you question if you're enough. You don't see it at first because it doesn't come with a warning label or a dramatic crash. It's a whisper in the dark, a slow unraveling that wraps around your heart before you even notice the weight. And then one day, you catch your reflection, eyes hollow, shoulders tense, and wonder when you stopped recognizing the person staring back. Love wasn't supposed to hollow you out. It was supposed to fill you up, wasn't it? We've been taught that love is a prize, something to win and hold up like a trophy for the world to admire. But what if the real victory isn't possessing someone else, but reclaiming the parts of yourself you've lost along the way? There's a game we play without realizing it, a silent tug-of-war where every word becomes a test and every gesture a judgment. The rules shift beneath your feet, and you're left scrambling to prove something you didn't know needed proving. You start to feel a tightness in your chest when they're near, a question mark hovering over every decision you make. It's not loud or violent. It's a quiet erosion, chipping away at who you were until you're a stranger in your own skin. Society sells us a lie that love must hurt, that passion thrives on chaos, and jealousy is just proof of devotion. But since when did peace become the enemy of romance? And why do we accept storms as the price of connection? The deeper you fall into this trap, the harder it is to see the bars forming around you. They're not made of steel or stone, but of doubt, fear, and the desperate need to be seen by someone who keeps looking past you. You might tell yourself it's normal to feel this way, that every relationship has its shadows. But deep down, there's a voice, soft, persistent, asking if this is what you deserve, if this is what love was meant to be. That voice isn't your imagination. It's the part of you that remembers what freedom feels like. It's the instinct you've buried under excuses, the one begging you to stop confusing chains for embrace. Real love doesn't demand you shrink to fit its frame. It stretches to meet you where you stand, doesn't leave you counting your flaws. It reminds you of the strength you forgot you had. Yet we live in a world that twists this truth, where people cling to half-loves because they're terrified of the silence that follows. We've been conditioned to believe that being alone is a failure, when in reality, it's the courage to walk away that takes the most strength. Think about the last time you felt truly at ease with someone, not performing, not justifying, just being. How far has that feeling drifted from where you stand now? The signs are there if you're willing to look. The way your laughter falters, the hesitation before you speak, the way you've started apologizing for things that aren't your fault. They're not accidents. They're warnings, and ignoring them only deepens the maze you're lost in. No one storms into your life declaring they'll break you. They slip in with smiles and promises, dismantling you piece by piece. It's the slow drip of control masked as care, the envy veiled as admiration that leaves you questioning your own reality. And here's the brutal part. You let it happen not because you're weak, but because you wanted to believe in the story. You wanted the fairy tale so badly that you ignored the plot twists unraveling around you. But what if the story isn't about them at all? What if it's about you? What if the hero isn't the one who stays, but the one who dares to leave when the script no longer serves them? We're taught to fear the void that comes with letting go. But what if that emptiness is where you find yourself again? What if loneliness isn't a punishment, but a space to breathe after years of holding your breath? The hardest truth is that no one will hand you the key to your own cage. You have to forge it yourself. So no night, no epiphany, just a choice day tethered to a shadow, or step into the unknown where you might finally stand whole. Picture someone you love deeply, a friend, a child trapped in the same spiral you're circling now. Would you tell them to endure it, to call it love, or would you beg them to break free before it's too late? It's easier to see the trap when it's not your own, to spot the cracks when you're not the one bleeding through them. But now the mirror's turned, and the question isn't what you'd say to them, it's what you'll do for yourself. Love shouldn't feel like a sentence, a constant negotiation with your own worth. It should be a sanctuary, a place where you're not just tolerated, but celebrated for the mess and magic of who you are. So why do we settle for echoes when we could have the real thing? Why do we cling to hands that pull us under when there's a shore waiting if we'd only swim? The world doesn't want you to ask these questions because the moment you do, you stop playing by its rules. You stop chasing validation in someone else's eyes and start seeking it in your own. And maybe that's the real curse knot, the love that turns sour, but the refusal to let it go when it does. We chain ourselves to sinking ships, convinced the waters where we belong, when all we need is the will to climb ashore. You're standing at a crossroads you didn't see coming, a fork between what's familiar and what's true. One path keeps you tethered to a version of love that dims your light. The other demands you risk everything to reignite it. There's no map for this, no guide to promise you'll make it through unscathed. But there's a quiet strength in choosing yourself, a whisper that says you're worth more than the crumbs you've been fed. So here's the question that lingers when the screen fades to black. What would happen if you stopped fighting for a love that binds you and started fighting for the one that sets you free? Leave your thoughts below, tell me. What's the cost of staying, and what's the price of walking away?